For the past few weeks, if you've been following us, we've been telling you about all the trade chatter around the NHL. This week was no exception. Lots of talk about various players being on the move from one team to another, in some cases from one team to another team to another team. But there was a huge difference this week. On Wednesday night, a major deal suddenly materialized that most observers felt could radically alter the fortunes of both of the teams that were involved. The Detroit Red Wings, and we have spent enough time talking about them this year it seems. They had been threatening a massive shakeup all year, and they had given new but very experienced general manager Ned Harkness a mandate to redesign the players who work for this franchise. Ned didn't take long. He dealt superstar Frank Mahovlich to the Montreal Canadiens for 3 players, 2 of them fairly young, more or less prospects. Going to Detroit was a highly regarded young right winger by the name of Mickey Redmond, a hard-shooting, fast-skating, very offensive-minded player, and a young left-wing center by the name of Guy Chiron. The Red Wings also got a veteran utility man, Bill Collins. I call him a utility man because really Bill was an all-purpose forward. He could fill in on any of the 3 lines. He's also an excellent defensive skater and a great penalty killer. We'll give you the reporting on this that we got from both Montreal and Detroit on this deal for their perspectives. We'll start with Pat Curran of the Montreal Gazette, whose report was filed from Bloomington, Minnesota. Pat said you knew something was going on when Phil Roberto of the AHL Voyageurs showed up at the airport in Dorval in Quebec when the team was heading for their game in Minnesota. The Habs and the writers wouldn't have been more surprised to see Frank Mahovlich. Well, they will see Frank Mahovlich today. He joins the Canadiens here after a trade which sent 3 players, 2 from the Habs roster, to Detroit for the veteran. And the Big M says, I'm very, very happy to be going to Montreal. And who wouldn't be happy to leave that circus that has become the Detroit Red Wings? But of course, the Montreal players didn't know this when Roberto suddenly appeared on the scene and got on the plane with them. They started looking at one another, and not because the rejuvenated minor leaguer looked prosperous in his big raccoon coat. The question in their minds was which player was going to have to sit out in favor of Roberto against the North Stars. Well, right away, the reporters that travel with the team started counting heads to see who was missing, who was dispatched down the American League. Leon Rochefort, Ray-Jean Houle, Ralph Backstrom, Mark Tardif, Pierre Bouchard, all the possible taxi squad members, they were all on hand, present and accounted for. John Ferguson checked in and ribbed Mickey Redmond with a little high rip for Rip Van Winkle in reference to Mickey's sleep-in from practice Tuesday, for which the Canadiens, by the way, fined him. Peter Mahovlich showed up in a big black leather coat decorated with military brass buttons. Physiotherapist Yvon Belanger came along, and he was asked which player might be injured, and he looked with a grin and said, how should I know? The number of players increased at boarding time, but the Air Canada attendant delayed handing out the boarding passes. Ralph Backstrom said he won't give them out until the coach gets here. Looks like some guys are not going to be making this trip, and speculation began to increase. Just a few minutes later, the professor, assistant general manager of the Canadiens, Ron Curran, sauntered along, and he had a glint in his eye, obviously enjoying a secret. He was immediately mobbed by the hockey writers who were present, and he said almost casually, we've made a trade. That's what's been going on all day. It's 3 for 1. Billy Collins, Mickey Redmond, and Guy Chiron are going to Detroit for Frank Mahovlich. One of the writers, obviously disbelieving because of Curran's cavalier attitude about such huge news, asked, Frank who? Curran went on to say the trade was completed only a few minutes ago. Frank will leave Detroit tonight or maybe in the morning, and he'll be in the lineup for our game against Minnesota. No one had actually noticed that while everyone was admiring Mahovlich's military coat or Phil Roberto's raccoon coat, that Collins and Redmond had walked down the hall and they had conferred privately with Coach Al McNeil and Curran. The four actually met in the airport bookshop where Mickey might have actually been looking for a copy of Where Do I Go From Here? And there, the coach and the assistant GM informed them of the trade. McNeil actually explained a little later that the deal for the Big M had been discussed for 2 weeks, even before all the talk today and before the demise of Sid Abel. So Abel probably sowed the seeds for this deal, but it reached the hot point where it was actually possible to happen just yesterday afternoon. I left the airport not knowing or not whether the trade was completed. As is so often the case in these kind of hockey transactions, neither of Collins nor Redmond had any inkling about a trade when they brought their bags to the airport for the trip to Minnesota. Collins said it always comes as a shock when you're traded, but that's hockey, I guess, and I got to accept it. Collins said that he had to go call his wife before she heard about it on TV. Collins then went away from Pat Kerr and walked up to Guy Lapointe and asked him to give a message to the rest of the teammates, and Lapointe said, "Why don't you give it to him yourself? Where are you going?" And Collins told Lapointe, "I'm on the move. I'll be seeing you," and he walked away. Pete Mahovlich, of course, was one of the first people that writers asked for his reaction. And Pete said when you lose two teammates to get your brother, it's kind of a surprise. But I think Frank will be happy here. At least with this kind of management, he'll know who's boss. It's kind of funny, Pete said. I talked to him on Saturday and mentioned the trade rumors. And he said, well, here in Detroit, everybody's on the block. As for the Detroit perspective of this deal, Jack Barry of the Detroit Free Press was the guy who broke the news in the Motor City. Barry worded his report this way. Frank Mahovlich was traded Wednesday to the Montreal Canadiens as new general manager Ned Harkness wasted no time in making his first move to rebuild the Red Wings with youth. The Red Wings acquired 23-year-old right wing Mickey Redmond, 27-year-old penalty-killing specialist Bill Collins from the Canadiens, and 22-year-old left winger Guy Charron from Montreal's American Hockey League farm club, the Voyageurs. The players are supposed to report to their new teams in time for Thursday's games. This was all happening on Wednesday. The Wings meet the Penguins at 8 p.m. at the Olympia, and the Canadiens are playing the North Stars at Bloomington, Minnesota. Red Wings coach Doug Barkley, his immediate reaction was, "I'm not happy that we had to let Frank go, but I'm really happy with the three players we're getting." Barkley said that Collins is a penalty-killing specialist and the team is weak in that department, and that he wanted to get a load off Gordy and Alex Delvecchio as far as killing penalties were concerned. They're the two Red Wings' best players, of course, and they do everything on that hockey team, and at their ages, they can probably use a bit of a breather. Barkley said he would put Charron in Mahovlich's spot on the line with Delvecchio and Howe. What a break for an unproven rookie. Barkley went on to say that if Charron can score, and they feel he can, he'll get the chances playing with Alex and Gordy. Guy Charron's 5'10", 170-pounder, and he had 2 goals in 15 games with the Habs before being sent to the AHL, where he had 18 points in 23 games, 5 of them goals. Coach Barkley also said that Redmond would take Wayne Connolly's place on Bruce McGregor's third line, and that he'd use Connolly on the power play and on the fourth line. Connolly's been having a rough time this year, and Redmond is actually going to be the top right winger behind Gordy. How Connolly had held that spot. Collins, as expected, will kill penalties, and he'll see spot duty as well. His main position is right wing, but he can play center and can even spend time on left wing when he's needed. Redmond was Montreal's 4th leading scorer with 30 points in 38 games, scoring 14 and setting up 16 others. Mickey is a 5'11", 185-pounder from Northern Ontario, Kirkland Lake to be exact, which is one of the leading incubators of NHL players. Players like Teeter Kennedy, Ted Lindsay, Dick Duff, the Hillman brothers all hail from Kirkland Lake. Red Wing winger Tom Webster also was raised in Kirkland Lake. The addition of players who are 22, 23, and 27 years of age will lower the Red Wings' average age another notch or so since Mahovlich was 33. Coach Barkley said it wasn't a case of Mahovlich's age, nor did the Wings get rid of him because he didn't produce. Barkley said, I think Frank even gave a little extra last weekend, and I appreciated it. Barkley, of course, is referring to the fact that Mahovlich scored a few key goals in Barkley's first games after he was appointed the bench boss of the Wings. So that was the major trade this week, and the perspective from both Montreal and Detroit. Frank Mahovlich from the Red Wings to the Montreal Canadiens in exchange for Mickey Redmond, who was the key player in the trade. From the Red Wings' perspective, young forward Guy Chiron, who really hasn't proven in the NHL, and veteran Billy Collins, who will really add a lot of depth to the Red Wings lineup. But the effect that Frank Mahovlich will have on the Canadiens was something that everybody speculated about. Frank keeps himself in excellent condition. He's 33 years old, but this guy has a lot left in the tank, and reunited with brother Peter may give Frank a new outlook on life. And I think Frank may experience the things like players like Dick Duff commented in the past, that when they went to Montreal, they felt they were traded like men. It gave them new leases on life, and they got caught up in the success and the legendary reputation of the Montreal Canadiens franchise, and this could lead to more Stanley Cups for Montreal in the immediate future. We'll have to see how it plays out, but this was the real big trade of the National Hockey League season, according to a lot of people.